And now we go on to Kuf Chaf Amud Beis. Frek the Gemara. Now that we have a ribui of hatmeim to teach me that in shrotzim yechayev for the liquids and so forth and so on is lisu hanef ligmarina. Why can't we derive all the other cases of all isurim from sheretz? Let sheretz be the paradigmic case, and you can't tell me that shrotzim have a chumrah of Shelo Hoysel Shasa Kosher because we have also Chelev, which is Lo Hoysel Kosher, and you can't have it's a Chumrah because of what of a Chiv Kares like the others, because there is no Chiv Kares in the case of Shrotzim. But the answer is Mishum Dikol Mifrach Mal Shrotzim Shkein Tu Mosam Emashahu. Right, that you're chayav for a very small amount, which is called a ke'adasha, the size of a lentil, and it is metame. So therefore, if the Torah is more machmir and shrotzim, haraya, the tumah is generated even by a lentil's worth of a sheretz, a fraction of a kezayis, is then maybe that's why the Torah extended the liability for chelev to include even liquids, even shesiyah, but not in other cases. Okay, now we're still continuing in this vein, but having addressed those four cases, now we want to know about Shari Surei Torah. For example, Tanya, HaTevel HaChodesh HaHegdesh HaShviyas VaKilayim Kulon Mashkim HaYotzim En Kamosam. In all these cases, you're chayav for the liquids. Minolan. How do we know that? Maybe we'll mention it from the four cases that we had until now, each of which have a drasha, whether it's nefesh or whether it's hatmeim. But malahanoch shekain isra b'me'elav hu tenach hecha de isra b'me'elav me'echa de lav isra b'me'elav minolan. Let's say if you take a look at the list in that brisa, we have hegdesh. Hegdesh is lav iser habamelav. How does something become a hegdesh? You have to be magdish it. Maybe the Torah is more machmir to prohibit liquids in cases of iser habamelav, like chelev, like nevela, like chametz, like shrotzim. They're all iser habamelav. You don't have to declare this is a sheretz, this is chametz. You don't generate the Isser. So maybe the Torah is more machmir when something is osir mitzad atzmo. In and of itself, it's osir. B'me'ela. But if you have hegdesh, which you have to create hegdesh in order to be osir, maybe in that case the Torah is more mekil. And the answer is the source for hegdesh, that you're chayev even for liquid hegdesh. When I say you're chayev, it means you're chayev a carbon me'ila, you might be chayav keren v'chomesh, is coming to be bikurim. Bikurim also is not ba me'elav. You have to declare that this is bikurim. Hey, bikurim is in this week's parsha. It's always a connection between Daf Yomi and the parsha. But bikurim gufayim minayin. How do I know that the kedusha and all these surim that apply to bikurim will apply even if I take the fruits of bikurim and I convert them into a liquid? And the answer is the Tani Dvei Rabbi Yossi pri atomevi. Okay, you want to be mafresh bikurim, it's got to be a pri. It can't be liquid. Yatomevi mashke. Bikurim are brought through hava all the way to the azora in the Beis Hamikdash. And there you do tnufa, and then you put it on top of the mizbeach. That's got to be a solid. That's got to be the original fruits. Shivas Haminin. However, let's say Hevi Anov, you designated your grapes, which is the fruit, as Bikurim, Udrachan, and now you converted them into grape juice. Can that, or let's say, does that grape juice have the status of Bikurim? Minayin, yes it does. Talmud Lomer, Tavi. According to Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yossi, there's an extra word tavi as a ribui to teach me that if you extract a liquid from your bikurim, like you extract grape juice from the grapes of bikurim, then that liquid, that grape juice has the status of bikurim. And now we can compare bikurim to hegdesh. And you wanted to know, how do you know that you're chai for hegdesh, even if you convert it to a liquid? I'm going to derive it from bikurim. Gemara says, no, you can't derive hegdesh from bikurim. She came to unim kriya v'anach. The Torah is much more machmir in bikurim than it is in any hegdesh, because hegdesh doesn't have halacha of mevi v'korei, that you have to read a parsha of kisavo. And not only that, when you declare something as hegdesh, you don't have to bring it on the mizbeach, but bikurim has to be brought on the mizbeach. So you see, the Torah is very strict with regard to bikurim, requiring kriya and hanacha, and therefore the Torah was machmir that even the liquids of bikurim have the status of bikurim. But how do you know hegdesh? Ela gamri truma. Okay, maybe we'll derive hegdesh from truma, because truma, like hegdesh, is eno bami elav. You have to declare it through your afrasha as truma, and you're chayev for the liquids of grapes and olives. So grape juice and oil from olives is included under all the isurim of truma and the isur lazaros. Truma guf minon. How do I know this? The Torah only says that the olives and the grapes are truma. How do you know that the oil and the wine is truma? Tiyomer mar utruas yodecha elu bikurim. Okay, now it's very interesting. These words, trumas yodecha, in Dvarim Perek Yud Beis, are referring to bikurim. Somehow the word yodcha means bikurim, because the Torah says in bikurim, v'lokach hakohen, will have it to the Shabbos, hatenav miyodecha. That's bikurim. And not only that, the pasuk could not possibly be referring to truma, even though it says the word truma here, because there's no mitzvah of hava with regard to truma. You don't bring truma to the Beis Hamikdash. And this list in Vayikra Yud Beis Perek Yud Zayin is items that have to be eaten inside Yerushalayim, not outside Yerushalayim, and that's not applicable to truma. So we're going to have to assume that this pasuk is referring to bikurim, and that's why it's called yodecha. And now we have a hekesh. But the fact that the Torah has truma in a pasuk of yodecha, which refers to bikurim, equates truma and bikurim. And this analogy will teach us that just like the liquids that come out of truma have the same status as the original produce, so the liquids from hegdesh. And again, how do we know the liquids of truma? We know it from the hekesh to the liquids of bikurim. And now we're going to derive hegdesh from truma. Because why couldn't you derive hegdesh from bikurim? And the answer is because bikurim have a mitzvah of kriya and hanacha, but truma is not brought to the mikdash. It doesn't have any hanacha. There's no halacha of mikra truma. There's no such thing as mikra truma. Okay, so fine. So truma doesn't have these chumras of bikurim. Truma, we know that the liquids are included in the original produce from an analogy of hekesh to bikurim. But now that we have truma, we're going to derive hegdesh from truma, and both hegdesh and truma are eno ba mela. The Gemara says, no, we can't derive hegdesh from truma. Mala truma shekain chayav nolem misa v'chomish. The Torah is very machmir in truma. If a non-kohen is going to eat truma, let's say unintentionally, then he has to bring keren v'chomish. If he does it intentionally, he's chayav misa. I mean, none of these chumras apply to hegdesh. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. The Gemara says chayav misa. Yeah, because in Hegdesh there is a din of Chomish. Yeah, he says it here in the note. I didn't see it. He says Hegdesh is also subject to the 1/5 rule, which comes under the law of Me'ilah, and you have to pay, if you unintentionally ate Hegdesh, then you have to pay a surcharge of a fifth. But we're focused on the fact that he ate the Hegdesh deliberately. And he's chayav misa. I'm sorry, just what I meant to say. I meant to say that Truma is a chayav misa b'dei shamayim, and he's chayav a chomesh. And Hegdesh, I think it's only a lav. I'm not even sure if it's a lav. But anyway, it's certainly not a chayav misa. So again, we have no justification to derive Hegdesh from Truma. Let's put Truma and Bikurim together and derive Hegdesh from the combination and the Tzadashava of Truma and Bikurim. And why is that? Because if you'll tell me that Hegdesh has a Chumrah, that it is just one second. How do we derive it from Bikurim and Truma? Again, Bikurim in and of themselves could not be the source for Hegdish because you need Kriya and Hanocha. Truma itself could not be the source for Hegdish because Truma is Chayav Misa B'dei Shamayim. Yeah. But Bikurim is also Chayav Misa B'dei Shamayim. I think that's what the Gemara is going to object now. Let's just see. Ela Gomi Travaya Mi Truma Bikurim, Ala Truma Bikurim, Shkei Chayav Nala Misa B'dei Shamayim. And you're Chayav Chomesh. Yeah, but in Hegdish there's also a din of Chomesh. Hegdish is also subject, I read this before, to the 1/5 rule. All right, so I guess the word Chomesh here is just brought in together with, it's always in one breath with the Chiv Misa B'dei Shamayim. But in any event, Truma doesn't have a Chiv Misa B'dei Shamayim. I'm sorry, Hegdish doesn't have a Chiv Misa B'dei Shamayim. Ela Asim Truma V'chad Mihanoch. So we're going to have a Tzad Shaveh, and we'll introduce Truma, even though it's Eino Bami Elov, to derive Hegdish, which is Eino Bali Elov, and we'll introduce maybe Chelev, Chametz, Nevela, Shrotzim, where there's no Chiv Misa B'dei Shamayim. Only Bikurim V'chad Mihanach. Or you could connect Bikurim with one of these, because Bikurim is also Eino Ba Me Elov. And if you'll argue, well, Bikurim has Kriya and Hanochas, I'll tell you, what about Nevela or, Chelev or Chametz or Shot? V'hod is not. Now we have a Mishnah in Masechta Trumos, Dvash Tmor v'yein tapuri b'chometz sitvanios, ushar me peros shel Trumo, Rabbi Eliezer Mechayev kem v'chosh Rabbi Yeshua poter v'mayka mifligi. Right, we've already derived the conclusion that as far as Truma is concerned, even the liquid Truma is considered part of Truma. Right, and we derive that from Trumas Yadecha, the equation between Truma and Bikurim. And Bikurim itself, we derive from the Pasuk Tavi. So why is it that Rabbi Yeshua says that if you are a Zar, a non-Kohen, and you eat any derivative from Truma, meaning a liquid, that you're potter? So the Gemara answers, "B'don mino mino b'don mino yukibi asra komifli." Rabbi Eliezer savar don mino umino. Ma bikurim mashkeni yotzem kamosam. Right, we derived from the pasuk Tavi that in bikurim, if you convert it to a liquid, it has the same status as the solid of the original bikurim. And therefore, if we're going to hold Uki Biasra, we go back to Bikurim, then Truma like Bikurim, you'd be chayav for if you're mafresh Truma from, let's say, Tmarim, I don't know if that's the right, so the Rabbanan, okay, fine, and you convert it into a liquid, that you're going to be chayav. Because ma bikurim afilu b'shar minim, we're not limited to olives and grapes, but rather bikurim applies to all seven mini perishah shtapchim in Eretz Yisrael. And if you convert them to a liquid yechayev, is af truma nami afilu b'shar minim. So that's called uki v'yasu. No, I'm sorry, that's called don minei uminei. Now we get to Rabbi Yeshua holds don minei v'uki v'yasro. Don minei ma bikurim mashkene yotzemen kabosam. But in the case of bikurim, we're talking about all sheva mashke. In the case of Truma, we're only talking about grapes and olives. Af Truma mashkin yosim kamosam uki b'yasra ma Truma mashkim dekodshi. I don't know. Dekodshi means that you are magdish it as Truma by being mafresh it. Anyway, tirosh v'yitzers in midiachrina lo. So let's say, for example, amongst the sheva minim shetorin shtabcha b'eh. Forget about that. Let's start the other way around. In the case of Truma, you have Truma on the 5 species of grains. So you made a bread, and now you converted that bread into a liquid, like we had before a discussion about that with regard to, challah or chadash or matzah. We spoke about chametz. So what would be the deal if you took Truma and it was from Chameshes mini dogon, and you made a bread out of Truma? The bread has the status of Truma. Now you're a non-Kohen and you eat that bread. Fine, you chay it. But now you turn that bread into a liquid. So Yeshua says you're potter. Why? Because don minei the uki biasra. Uki biasra means we go back into the context of Truma. And where does the Torah say that the liquids of Truma have the status of Truma, and they generate a chiyuv misa chiyuv misa b'dei shemaim? That's only tirish v'yitzah. That's only wine and oil. Midei achrini lo, but not, let's say, bread. Izaf mashkin yotzu ben kamosam tirish v'yitzah in midei achrini lo. Frekti gemar v'hodesnan. A Mishnah in Trumos. ein mivim bikurim mashke ela yotzim min hazeisim min hanovim. I don't get it. I mean, we wanted to say in bikurim that in all shivas minim, if you convert it into a liquid, it still has the status of bikurim. Mani, who is the author of this Mishnah in Masechta Trumos? Rabbi Yeshua, very simply, it's Rabbi Yeshua. Tiyomer Domi Nevi Uki Biasra. But we have to add another piece of the puzzle. In other words, we're going to link up with an analogy of a hekesh through Trumas Yodecha, Truma to Bikurim, and we're going to derive in Truma Uki Biasra that it only applies to Tirush V'Yitzor but not to Shar Minim, and then we're going to go back to the hekesh again and Gamalula Bikurim Truma. So the hekesh goes in two directions, and now we're going to derive Bikurim from Truma. We're going to limit this halach of Mashkin Ayotze Behen only to Zeisim and Anovim. Interesting, this whole sugya focuses on Isurim, but the Gemara in Brachos focuses on brachos, meaning what bracha do you make on, apple juice and so forth and so on. And it ties it into this machlokas. Anyway, v'hadasnan, let's finish up. We have a Mishnah in Trumos about Orla. Ain't so bar mishum Orla el al yotzim and azeisim and anovim bilvad. So oil and grape juice, or we'll call it wine, of Orla generates a chiv malchus. But you can have Orla on other peros ha'ilon, other ilanos. But there, if you make it into a liquid, you're not chai for Orla. Mani, once again, Rabbi Yeshua, the Omar Gdom Minov Yuki Biasra, right? So we have a hekesh between Truma and Bikurim to teach us that you're chayiv even for the liquids, but that's only with regard to Tirush V'Yitzar in Truma, because that's called Uki V'Asra, and then Gamaluhu Bikurim Truma. We go backwards again in the other direction, and we derive Bikurim from Truma. And then, and here we conclude today with Kuf Chaf Aleph Amid Aleph, V'Hadar Maisi Leili Orla, Pri Mi Bikurim. We have a Gzeir Shava Pri for Bikurim. The term Pri appears in the parsha of Bikurim and also in the parsha of Orla. And the Gzeir Shava, Rabbi Yeshua derives from the Gzeir Shava that whatever applies to Mashkin Yotze Behem in Bikurim will apply ipso facto in Orla, and therefore Mashkin Yotze Behem in Orla for Achiv Malchus for Orla will only apply to Hayotzim and Azeisim V'Nanovim, like Rabbi Yehuda's Shita Bikurim, based on the Hekesh to Truma and Uki Be'asra, and then we come with the Hekesh back the other direction, and we derive Bikurim from Truma. Now we're going to derive Orla from Bikurim. Okay then, so this is where we'll stop for today. And Mitzvah tomorrow we start, if it's okay, we'll start a little bit later. Let's call it for, let's say 9:45. Okay then?
Fine. Sounds good.
Great. See you then.